going to begin in a very conventional fashion, following the mainstream press. I'm just going to very quickly comment on a year since the general election, therefore a year of the Starmer government. There were a few on the left that talked about a crisis of expectations. I must admit that I wasn't convinced at the time, from my angle at least. Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer, and the rest of them were putting expectations about the Labour government at zero, although they were actually promising that they wouldn't be the Tories. And well, yeah, they've delivered on that. So we've had Labour austerity as opposed to Tory austerity, and that's true. And we've had Labour attempts to balance the government's books as opposed to Tory attempts to balance the books. And I think it needs to be emphasised that this isn't simply because of some, I don't know, Starmerite Rachel Reeves obsession. It's actually where British capitalism is at. And the fact of the matter is, whether we have a Labour government, a Tory government, a coalition government, a reform government, Britain is an adjunct of the United States. Britain is reliant on the city. Britain, hasn't got an empire, hasn't got any independence. So all of those critics that are saying, if only Labour did this, if only Labour did the other, are really missing the point. That, in other words, their ability to deliver anything significant, within capitalism, it's severely limited. And the fact of the matter is that if we look at spending, we can see it's subordinate to the city. We can see it's subordinate to the United States, with Starmer coming in talking about 2.5% of GDP on defence, 3%, and we're now talking about 5%. And of course, what we need to understand about that is that we're talking about American arms. We're talking about American hardware. And just to illustrate that, you note that one of Starmer's first moves when it comes to arms was to buy another squadron of F-35s. This was the slightly cheaper F-35. I don't know how many 100 million they come in each, but remember, these were the ones that are going to be equipped with nuclear bombs. But just like Trident, just like Polaris before it, these actually are not only American supplied nuclear weapons, they're actually reliant on the American say-so to use them. So all of this stuff about an independent nuclear deterrent is a nonsense. What we're talking about is Britain as an extension of the United States. Okay, so what have we seen? First thing Rachel Reeves does is say, well, I've got to make cuts. And the first thing she cuts, of course, isn't arms, isn't so-called defense. It's an attack on the most vulnerable in society. Well, what a surprise there. So the first thing is two-child benefit cap. We have the suspension of Labour MPs for daring to vote against that. Then we have the attack on pensioners, and winter fuel payments go. I have to say that as a poor pensioner, I did as the government advised me. I applied. It was very easy, by the way, very easy. Pensioner credits, very easy form to fill in. Donk, 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 there's the box to tick. I tick, 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 tick. A year later, I ring up and I'm told by the voice at the other end, a recorded voice, of course, this is me paraphrasing, don't waste your time ringing us up again. we've got a huge queue and we'll get around to dealing with you in due course. I could be dead by the time I end up getting my winter fuel payment. And I suspect that that's the sort of thing that they're actually relying on. What was next? PIP. That is difficult. You know, if you're applying for PIP, this is a nightmare story, and it's no surprise that if you manage to get onto PIP, you know, personal care and all the rest of it, that you'd want to stay on it. The last thing you want is to go off and get too much pay or you know, knocked off that benefit, because it's absolute hell getting on there in the first place. And of course, the calculation was this will save them, what is it, £5 billion pounds. Well, we know what the result is. It's not a few MPs that were rebelling this time. It was well over 120, and that was too much. And basically, we saw not only before the debate, but during the debate in the House of Commons, government ministers basically gutting the bill. But of course, what we're left with is a two-tier system. Those on PIP, they can say, oh, we'll be all right. But it's the next person that gets ill. It's the next person that needs help that is no longer going to get it. Or the chances are, if they get it, it won't be enough. And they will be forced into poverty. And that's the government's own report. Okay, what else can we say about first year of Labour government? It would be boring to say told you so, because I don't think, other than those, how should I put it, any Labour government is better than a Tory government types. I don't actually think that this is anything other than what we were saying. This will be the most right-wing Labour government in history, and that's what's been delivered. A Labour government that, of course, is the poodle of the United States. And I thought myself it was pretty well summed up by Keir Starmer's, what was it, Island of Strangers speech. I mean, I live in London. I think half of London now, you know, half of Londoners were born not outside London. That was the case when I was a kid. You know, people would come into London for whatever reason. Now it's half the population of London were born outside the UK. Well, they're my friends. You know, they're my neighbours. They're people I know. The idea that they're strangers and alien to me is an alien concept. And now we have, I don't know if anyone listened to it, this interview with Starmer on the anniversary of him becoming Prime Minister with, what's his name? Radio 4 Robinson interview. Apparently it's the fourth time that he's interviewed Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer turns round when he's asked about this island of strangers. He says, yeah, I regret that now. You know, I was busy with other things. Now, I've heard him being busy with three other things. NATO, apparently, he was distracted by what was going on in Ukraine. He was distracted by his old car. Remember the car that he sold to one of his old... Apparently that distracted him, and his brother being ill. And I mean, what sort of a prime minister delivers a speech, you know, like a robot? Well, the answer is Keir Starmer. And my attitude to politicians, it's not what you're saying, because we know that, you know, 9 times out of 10, this is an advisor. You know, what marks out at least any sort of reasonable prime minister is the advice that you listen to. And the fact that he listened to this advice and didn't tell his advisor where to get off is quite remarkable. But clearly there's a strategy there. So he might regret the particular words because he's been told that this is basically Enoch Powell territory. But the strategy seems to be clear, and it seems to come from Morgan McSweeney. He's the brains behind Keir Starmer. And the strategy seems to be, don't talk about the Tories, they're keeping quiet, go on about reform, and aim for a situation where the next general election isn't between the Tories and Labour. Aim for a situation of where the next general election is going to be about reform versus Labour, and sensible people will vote Labour. Well, it reminds me of me when I looked at the first Republican debate way back, and there was this Donald Trump guy, and I just said, it's impossible. The Republican establishment is never going to allow this guy to run. Well, there you are. He got elected, and my God, he got elected again. Yeah, maybe it's a clever strategy, but be very careful what you wish for. Okay, moving on. 120 plus rebels when it came to PIP, but when it came to Palestine Action, I think the number was 26. In terms of Labour MPs, 9 of them, and we're talking, remember, 9 of them with the whip. Ian Byrne, Diane Abbott, Tariq Ali, Imran Hussein, Clive Lewis, Graham Morris, Nadia Whitthorne, who's that? Kim Johnson, nearly got there, nearly at the end, and Richard Bergen. That's it, 9 rebels voting against this piece of legislation. The fact of the matter is that if we look at Palestine Action, what's it actually been guilty of? Well, quite frankly, spraying the headquarters of some arms company, climbing on a wall, smashing some windows and going down with a hammer. Doesn't really strike me, I have to say, as terrorism. How many people have been killed? How many government ministers, live in fear as the result of Palestine Action? Well, I think the answer is quite straightforward, and it's nil and nil. No one's been killed. No one lives in fear. They might live in embarrassment, but they don't live in fear. And if we think back, in terms of British history, have Palestine Action done anything fundamentally different, compared with who? The suffragettes, CND, the Greenham Common women? I remember with the Greenham Common women, didn't they take a hammer or something like that to some jet fighters and were let off by a jury? Didn't CND sit down? Didn't CND embarrass government ministers? Certainly when it came to the suffragettes, they chased Lloyd George all around the country. They burnt down houses. They smashed windows. But nowadays they're viewed as, I'll use the word, heroines or heroes. They're lauded by the establishment because it's distant. When it comes to Palestine Action, we even had people going around with placards, I'm Palestine Action, or we're all Palestine Action, or I support Palestine Action, being arrested. That's an offence, with this legislation. So it's a very draconian piece of legislation. And of course, it's got a logic, and the logic's quite clear. A few years ago, I was very amused because some, I use the word advisedly, some Goldsmiths academics produced a study for the government, and it was about terrorism or potential terrorism on the left. And we were mentioned. John Rees was mentioned, but I wasn't mentioned personally. I was very upset not to be mentioned. I've had so many articles about the popular militia. My articles have been illustrated with front pages with, Kalashnikov machine. It was Peter Manson that was quoted. Either way, these academics, remember, this is paid work for the government, was saying these people are dangerous. And I take that seriously, because here we are. Yes, I advocate a people's militia. I advocate armed struggle if necessary. I copy, in that sense, the Chartists, who said, the physical force wing, the left wing of the Chartists said, peacefully if we can, violently if we must. And in my view, if we win, when we win a House of Commons majority, or if we look like we are going to win a House of Commons majority, we've got to be prepared to defend that majority against the police, the army, the secret state, the monarchy, the Americans, and you name it. In other words, what Karl Marx and Frederick Engels talked about as the slaveholders' rebellion against a socialist majority in Britain. We're prepared to do that. Any Democrat would be prepared to do that. But hey, yeah, the danger is precisely, first they come for Palestine action, then they come for us. We made that warning, remember, over the anti-Semitism thing when it first got started, and we warned Jeremy Corbyn that, of course, this is about you. This is about getting rid of Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party. Well, clearly Jeremy Corbyn ended up suffering from, what's it called, Stockholm syndrome, and started to expel and witch hunt his own friends, his own supporters. Well, we're not going to do that. So I'm not going to give you my slogan about the banning of Palestine action, except to say that, of course, we oppose it, and any Democrat would oppose it. And the fact that you only found 26 people, 26 MPs in the House of Commons who are prepared to stand up for the right to protest. Remember, these people can still be sent to jail. You know, they can be arrested. And all they're asking is, we want the right to plead before a jury. We want the right to put our case to a jury. And any decent jury, of course, will say these people are guilty, but we're going to let them off. That's what decent juries do. Why? Because everyone knows what's happening in Palestine. You know, what's the death rate in Palestine at the moment? What? I don't know. 50,000, 60,000, something like that, with the Lancet actually saying that the probable figure is something like 40% greater. That we look at this aid, now that they've kicked the UN out, who had 400 distribution sites, right? We're now dealing with this grossly missing Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, who've managed to shoot 400 Palestinians dead. And I don't know about you, did you listen to the recording? Not of an Israeli soldier, you know, letting off his machine gun, but a member of this GHF who recorded his colleagues. And you hear, I only listen, I don't watch the news, I listen to the news, but you hear the machine gun go off, and you hear some bod shout out, "You got one." And the Israelis responded by saying, well, maybe he fell over. Well, I'm sorry. The attitude was like they were on a turkey shoot. And that's the attitude of these guys delivering aid. Do you think the Israeli soldiers are any different? Of course they're not. You know, they're there to kill. They're there to slaughter. That's the orders that they're being given. And what you've got, of course, is starving Palestinians. And they have the choice. Do I risk being shot or do I starve? What about my children? Do I risk being shot or do I feed my children? This isn't something that's accidental. This isn't something because of the incompetence of the Gaza humanitarian. It's not the incompetence of the Israeli authorities. This is the plan of the Israeli authorities. They want to starve Gaza. They want the Palestinians so desperate that they accept any deal or they get out. And there's an article in the Financial Times, and I presume this must be done with the editor going, yeah, run this story. And I didn't know what to make of it at first because I didn't know the initials. But anyway, here we go. The BSG, right, is complicit with the FHF or GHF, excuse me. And I went, what the hell is this article about? Anyway, what we're talking about is the Boston Consulting Group. Now, I don't know the Boston Consulting Group from Adam, I have to confess. Now, whether it's a famous consulting group or an obscure one, I simply don't know. But we know what the GHF is, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Anyway, the Financial Times ran an expose of this Boston Consulting Group, because apparently it was starting off working for free, pro bono, for this GHF through a whole number of different connections. And what it was ended up being paid a contract. What did it get? £41 million, no, excuse me, dollar contract. To do what? To research how much it would cost to actually transport 500,000 Palestinians out of Gaza. And this is voluntary, by the way. Oh, this is, no force involved, no bayonets, no bullets flying. Do you fancy getting out? And they came up with this answer. Well, it will cost $9,000 per person, right? And what you do, you offer them something like $5,000, living expenses. You transport them, I don't know where, but on the basis that you never come back, right? Apparently, they also looked into what about getting rid of the whole lot of the population, all 2.2 million of the population. How much would that cost? What are the logistics involved in that? Now, apparently, somebody in this company, I don't know whether it's the chief executive, I don't know, I just don't know. Either way, the company found out that it was found out and took several steps back. But what I would say, in terms of this company, what it reminded me of was, the reporting of Hannah Arendt of the Eichmann trial, 1961 in Israel. Remember, Eichmann was just some bureaucrat, involved in the extermination of 6 million Jews. And what she said, the banality of evil. Well, this is what the Boston Consulting Group reminded me of, the banality of evil. There you are, you've got your commission, you do your number crunching, the company gets its 41 million, there's the report, here's our estimate of what it would cost to get rid of 500,000 or 2.2 million Palestinians. Well, I say that these people are guilty of war crimes. And I say that if you look at war crimes, what we ought to be saying, we're not strong, but this is what we ought to be saying, we will put you on trial. We will put you on trial for war crimes. And what we should be saying also is this government, this Labour government, and this parliament is also guilty of war crimes. The only ones that aren't guilty are those that are in rebellion, and that would include rebellion over the ban on Palestine action. So yeah, this government is complicit with genocide. And if you look at the moral outrage of this government, it's not over that, is it? It's of artists, for example, at Glastonbury. So it's over Kneecap. It's over Bob Villan. What's the crime of these people? To call out evil, to call out war crimes. That's all these people are guilty of. And what we have is Lisa Nandy, the culture secretary. Why aren't BBC executives? Why aren't BBC reporters? Why aren't they being sacked, she says? Well, why aren't you being sacked? Why aren't you being hauled up in front of a trial? This is, remember, what something the Russians talked about. I don't know what particular stage it was at the second Congress of the RSDLP. This is when the Russian comrades had no power, by the way. and they had a debate about the death sentence. Well, in general, Marxists opposed the death sentence, and I opposed the death sentence. But I think it was Plekhanov that says, hey, wait a minute, we shouldn't abolish the death sentence. We want to shoot the Tsar after a trial. We want a show trial of this criminal. And remember, when it came to the Romanovs, when they were killed, Lenin was furious, not because he was shedding a tear about the royal family of Russia being killed. No, he said, we wanted to put these people on trial before the world. We wanted to find them guilty, and they would have found them guilty because they were guilty. That's very much my attitude, and not just to the obvious war criminals who we had recordings of, but also these evil companies that are complicit in genocide. And of course, it's not just the Boston Consulting Group. You go through all major British arms companies, they're complicit. BAE Systems, one can just carry on. Rolls-Royce, one just carries on down the list. Okay. Corbyn. Corbyn's party. Who the hell knows what's going on? Apparently Carla Roberts does, and I look forward to Carla Roberts's article next week. But no one really knows what the hell is going on. But what a way not to launch a party. We all know that discussions have been going on for an awful long time. Jeremy Corbyn has been letting hints off about some sort of a party for month after month after month. But now we have Zara Sultana announcing that she was the co-leader of this party. This is without a name. This is without a constitution. This is without a program. This is without any members. But she apparently is co-leader along with Jeremy Corbyn, who isn't a member, nor is she, because there isn't a party yet, but she's going to be co-leader. Well, that's great to know. This, you begin as you intend to go on. That's how it seems to me. What's it all about from her point of view? I don't know. But what she's done, she's got when I last heard, which was only a few days ago, and I'm sure the numbers have gone up since then, she had 20,000 people write in to fill in her form. I don't know whether they're called sultanas. I don't know, or is it Team Sultana, or I don't know what the name of this group is. But apparently you can sign up, give your well, this is a database, isn't it? This is what this is all about. So she's got a database already of 20,000 people. My guess is that what happens when you fill in your form, you become a sultana, is that the next thing that happens is they write to you asking you for money. So there you are. She's got a machine coming into existence. Now, what's Corbyn doing meanwhile? He seems to be leaking to the press, to the Times, the Telegraph, I don't know. But it seems to be popping up all over the place when negotiations are still continuing. This is too early. Is this about not being the co-leader? I don't know. Is this about waiting for other MPs? I don't know. Is it about waiting for the trade unions? I don't know. What's it about, Jeremy? I don't know. Does Jeremy know? I don't know. But my fear is that what we'll end up with, if we end up with anything, is going to be much closer to momentum than anything I recognize as a party. So the democracy I'm fearing is very much the tick box on the computer, on filling in a form, a Bonapartist referendum sort of a party. What name would you like to call the party? I won't have a debate about it. You'll be given a choice of 4. What sort of a leader would you like? Would you like Jeremy, or would you like Zara Sultana? I don't know. Will there be any other candidates? I don't know. I'm not inspired myself, but the fact that 20,000 people sign up to become a supporter of her, it does tell you something. That's the tip of the iceberg. Clearly, there's mass discontent, and mass discontent of people on the left, and they're not organized at the moment. And that needs to change. The real question is, are we going to repeat the mistakes of the past? That's how it's looking to me at the moment. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I would very much welcome that. Okay, what time are we? 31, so we're coming to an end now. And what I'm going to do is report on our FCU, Forging Communist Unity. We used to call it a process, but I think we can just call it FCU at the moment. I went along with a few other comrades to the Monday meeting of Talking About Socialism in order to talk about this letter that we got from Nick Rack and Ed Potts. It was a couple of lines, and basically it said, we're not talking to you anymore, and we want to end our involvement in FCU. And I went along, and yeah, the chair announced that Comrade Nick Rack will be talking. He'll be talking for half an hour, and all of you lot will be given 3 minutes. And I went to the chat. I don't normally use chat, and I went to the chat and I wrote 3 minutes! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And comrades know me. I can barely say hello in three minutes. But anyway, I was called to talk, and I basically delivered the message that we'd sent from the Provisional Central Committee. We always envisaged FCU to be a prolonged process. We always thought that there would be misunderstandings. We urge patience, not rushing things, but going at the pace that is needed. You know, in Nick's talk, he accused the CPGB collectively, myself, Mike McNair, basically of being liars, that somehow, you know, whatever comes out of our mouth, it's there to deceive, it's there to blacken, it's there to misrepresent. And I pleaded, for what it was worth, in my remaining 30 seconds, that's not true. And then I was cut off. And the example I was going to use, or the example I used, was, believe it or not, the length of the TAS draft program. I'd been told, I said, that it was about 4,500 words or thereabouts. And I was told that this was a lie. And I said, no, it's not a lie. That's what I was told. I haven't got it. I haven't read it, which was true at the time. But the point would be that what we were dealing with is a comrade who wanted to, how should I put it, get the wrong end of the stick wherever possible. We were looking at a comrade who wanted to end talks, end the exchanges between the three organizations. And, you know, the example, for example, that he chose to illustrate the terrible names that we've been using in our written material were things like Bakuninite. I mean, what a terrible thing to say about someone on the left. I do note that I do it occasionally. Mike McNair, on the other hand, does it about the whole of the left most of the time. I mean, he looks at the SWP and its strikeism and said, well, that's Bakuninite. Bakunin, remember, believed in the general strike, that the workers go on strike and the capitalism basically, you know, they throw up their arms in surrender, and the revolution is done and dusted. You know, I've used that example. I've also used the example, look, comrades, your idea that if you establish socialism in one country, by the rule of the working class in my lexicon, yes, this will inspire. People will say, yeah, these workers in Britain, for example, they can take power. But if we remain in isolation, what happens? to British socialism or socialism in Britain, it will be poverty. You know, how much food do we rely on that comes from abroad? 50% of it? You know, I mean, if we look at Rachel Reeves trying to balance the budget, how are people in Britain meant to live? We don't produce cars in Britain. We assemble cars. We don't produce the engines. We don't produce the gearbox. Hence my joke. This is a joke, by the way, of a Tasmobile being pulled by horses, because there's no engine, is there? But apparently this is an accusation that the comrades in Tas want to emulate Pol Pot in wiping out a third of the population. No, that's not true. What we're warning about is the idea that socialism in isolation, working class rule in isolation, will all be positive, all be wonderful, all will be very inspiring. Wasn't true about 1917. It won't be true about any isolated revolution, let alone in an advanced country like Britain. Anyway, we had a situation of where myself was given 3 minutes, other CPGB comrades were generously given 3 minutes as well. TAS members who were complaining about the 3-minute format, they were only, of course, given 3 minutes. But Comrade Nick Rack was not only given his half an hour, he was given 15 minutes to reply to the discussion. Not my way of dealing with differences between organizations, or for that matter, differences within your own organization. Okay, now taking a step back and writing about this process, looking at what's occurred, I have to say, and this has been backed up by comrades not in the CPGB, it does strike me, I could be wrong about this, but this is sort of my explanation, that what was going on with this is that comrades Potts and Rack were sort of dragged into negotiations with the CPGB. Comrades had been agitating, who were in their circle. You've got to talk to the CPGB. You've got to talk to the CPGB. If you want a communist party, surely you should be talking to the CPGB. And I can remember turning up to this meeting called by the comrades in Marx, and we were told that this would be about an education program. They chose me on the PCC to go because I was told, this is gospel, that Nick Rack will talk to anybody but you. And so it had to be me, didn't it? I had to go. Couldn't be Mike. It couldn't. Well, that's truth. So I went along and I went, oh God, this is going to be really boring, isn't it? And there you are. Nick Rack said, I don't want to talk about an education program. We should be talking about fusion. What was my response? Great. This is excellent. We'll go for this. And of course, we agreed to meet, and we'd been meeting. But I think what we were dealing with, at least on Nick's behalf, and maybe Ed, I don't know. I no way of judging. I don't. I'm obviously doing mind reading, so maybe that's unfair as well. Either way, my expectation is, or I think Nick's expectation was, that others would join. Others would join TAS, others such as RS21 who came along to the first meeting would join the discussions, and the CPGB would be reduced to a minority. And what we could have is a diplomatic agreement for some sort of, how should we put it, fusion process that blurred programmatic differences. Nick said it himself, that his draft program, I mean, this is his words, not mine, has been drafted for diplomatic purposes. So this is meant to be acceptable to comrades in the SWP. It's meant to be acceptable to comrades in the Revolutionary Communist Party, SPEW. I don't know about the social imperialists, but it's that sort of approach, not our approach. And I think the stage was arrived at pretty early of where he went, shit, CPGB is going to be in a majority. I'm going to be in a minority, and that's intolerable. And therefore we had this, I've never really understood it. What is this stuff all about? Bad language, about the CPGB just being inveterate liars and a deliberate misrepresentation. This is normal politics. This isn't some lying campaign. And even if it was deliberate misrepresentation, you can expose liars. You can expose people who are malevolent. Anyway, I'll finish this particular section just by a very quick comment on the draft program that comrades Ed and Nick drew up. I've read the second version, which is the slightly longer version, as opposed to the first version. And I have to say, comrades, it's a highly unimpressive piece of work. I know the comrades are busy, so they're writing in between demanding court cases. But what they've come up with is, well, I wouldn't call it third rate. It's an embarrassment. You know, if I'd written something like that, I would really be thinking, what the hell am I doing in communist politics? And it's true, Karl Marx could come out with the entire maximum program of the French Workers' Party. I don't know whether he was sitting or standing in Engels's front room, but Marx had decades of programmatic experience. You know, he wrote the main documents of the First International, Communist Manifesto, program of the Communist Party in Germany, and not a few other documents besides. But if we take the minimum program of the French Workers' Party, this was a year in preparation. And Marx drew up a questionnaire of 101 different points and got a response, apparently, to it in terms of workers in France. This is what we're interested in. What we had is comrades in France touring the country, talking to people. And they came back to Karl Marx, Engels, and that's when they drew up the program. So this program wasn't out of thin air, certainly wasn't designed as an act of diplomacy, as you can tell by contemporary reaction on the French left. Of course, Marxism was on the rise in France, but Marxism was eclipsing left Jacobinism. It was eclipsing Proudhonism. It was eclipsing Blanquist anarchism. And they called this the London program. They could see Karl Marx's thumbprints all over it and denounced it. So this didn't bring together the existing French left. It divided the French left. I won't go on about the subsequent history of the French Workers' Party and what happened to this individual or that individual. But if we look at this draft program, I have to say that other than the demand for the election of judges, which I absolutely support, what we had is vagary. So nothing about working conditions, nothing about hours, nothing about, you know, whether you replace the House of Lords with an elected body or you just abolish the second chamber. Nothing definite about a popular militia, nothing about the United States, nothing about Europe, nothing about women's oppression, nothing about gays, right? What we had, though, is 4 references to the working class producing everything that's useful in society. So it produces all the goods and all the services. Well, this is directly after we've had a long argument with the comrades about the middle classes. Well, my dad, I don't know if it's a secret, I don't think it's a secret, was a very petty bourgeois individual. He ran a little business and he produced useful services. He produced, in that sense, goods. Nick and Ed are trained, practicing barristers. I would include them as part of the middle class. And if I got into trouble with the law, I'd go to someone like Nick or someone like Ed and ask them for their services. And I wouldn't turn around and say, well, you're completely useless. Only the working class produce useful items in our society. And they didn't just say it once, they said it 3 times. And again, I come up with, in terms of our discussions with them, apparently Russia, the Soviet Union, I'm not sure, had nothing to do with socialism. Or no, true social, didn't it? October 1917, the formation of the USSR. I know what happened in the 20s. I'm not equating North Korea or China with real communism, but I would say that we've got to have some sort of answer there. Okay. Dictatorship of the proletariat. Now, I'm not someone who goes banging on about the dictatorship of the proletariat, but yeah, Karl Marx, okay, how many times did Marx and Engels use it? I think it was 12, but they did use it. They did come up with this phrase and give it a particular content, and they bracketed it with the Democratic Republic. But apparently Nick says, this is despite our discussions, that in a program that's meant to be for diplomatic reasons, and I said I'd have problems agreeing with that, still put that formulation in. So I'm just left slightly nonplussed by what's going on. But my point is, I think what happens, and maybe I'm wrong, but this is something that's also been argued by other participants, not in the CPGB, that Nick was looking for an excuse because he would find the position of being in a minority intolerable. Now, that's putting things in a bad way, but I can't work it out any other way. Now, lastly on that, I think it was Ian, our chair, this evening actually said it was a real shame, you know, that you split before Communist University. I think Nick replied to you, Ian, that's a lie, called you a liar, and good. Not because you're a liar, by the way, Ian, but because what we had is a commitment on Monday, and okay, I put it into chat. We welcome the fact that you're coming to Communist University. We want the discussions to continue. We want you to come back in. And apparently there was a vote in TASS confirming that. And I'm very much in favor of that. I don't know what character our debates will have over the week. All I can say is that on Zoom, face to face, our discussions have been frank, but always friendly. And I'm certainly determined to keep it to that. Okay, I'm now going to wrap up, Ian, but what I would like to do, I don't normally recommend BBC programs, let alone Radio 4 programs, but I was doing the paper, you know, collating it, and we were doing the mail out on Thursday. And Gabby said, oh, did you listen to Melvin Bragg and In Our Time? And I went, no, but I normally do. And she said, it really will be interesting because it reminded me of forging communist unity. And this was about civility. And it was a program with various historians and experts and all the rest of it, talking about, for example, Martin Luther, you know, the Protestant reformer, and Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher. The long and the short of it was that Luther came along and basically called the Pope the Antichrist and wouldn't be shut up. You are, I mean, I'm doing it in a Northern Ireland accent. I can't do the German. I'm sort of thinking of the Reverend Ian Paisley. So it's sort of stuck in my head. Either way, what was interesting about the debate is Thomas Hobbes, who was coming out demanding, pleading, I think demanding civility. Doff your cap. For the sake of peace, agree. We don't want war. So when it comes to the Church of England, and is it 38 items of articles of faith? Just swear, keep the peace, don't argue. And what was interesting in terms of this program is how the Protestants started to move towards the idea of toleration. We demand the right to insult the Pope. We demand toleration to insult the Pope. And that's really what the CPGB is doing. Now, we're not denouncing Nick Rack as the Antichrist. We're not doing anything of that sort. But we do demand the right, when it comes to the trade union bureaucracy, for example, we demand the right to put in our program, we want to curb the trade union bureaucracy. We want to overthrow of the trade union bureaucracy. When it comes to the rest of the left, we demand the right to criticize them. And in our view, the only worthwhile communist unity is a unity that accepts that right, the right to criticize. If you don't have that, it's hopeless. So yes, we have had disagreements with the comrades, about what do you call socialism? Do you call it the first stage of communism? Do the middle class exist? Are you going to forcibly expropriate? I think that these are secondary issues. The main issue that actually divides us is the right to criticize. Now, I've been urged, and Mike's been urged, if only you didn't use that word, if only you didn't use that language. I think that's a delusion. My own view is, if Mike didn't use the word Bakuninist and I didn't use the example of Pol Pot, it would be something else that would be used to say, well, that's too much. This is going beyond the pale. To me, what we have to have is frank exchanges. Sometimes those exchanges will be over the top. So what? That is something we have to live with. And this is what we will certainly be going into to any Corbyn party or anything that we'll be going into. Now, they can silence us through rules and threaten us with expulsion. We have the weekly worker. We are not going to be silenced. So that's our approach. So we would still call upon the comrades in TAS, would call upon Ed Potts and Nick, come along to Communist University. Let's debate this question out. Come back to the discussions, because these comrades have shifted to a position where they favor a mass communist party. So do we. We want a mass communist party. And if you have a mass communist party that's going to be worthwhile, it will be full of argument. It will be constant arguments. It will not be a party, if it's worthwhile, people going around saying, I agree with you. I think what your speech you just delivered was wonderful. Your article was faultless. That would be completely useless in terms of actually going forward. That would be, how should I put it, an organization of sycophants, not thinking, feeling communists. We want thinking, feeling communists in a decent mass communist party. Finish with that. Thank you, Ian.
Okay, just on the banning of Palestine action under the Terrorism Act. I think it's, how shall I put it? It would be workable for one of the big mass demonstrations in central London with 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 people on it to say we are all Palestine action. The policy of saying we are all Palestine action for small groups on their own and small demonstrations outside the courtroom is not practically workable, because the ban in itself has the consequence that you immediately saying we are all makes you immediately arrestable. And of course, the same is true of, it's always all of these things, question of balance of forces. There's no problem with hundreds of thousands of people chanting we are all Hezbollah, as they did. Well, it's a political problem with it, because it's self-identification with Hezbollah, or we are all Hamas. But it doesn't work as a tactic for the small group, for the relatively small group. I flag up that the Terrorism Act 2000, has this extraordinarily wide definition in it. I did write about this way back in 2002, 2003. It covers anything done which is for political objectives, which is illegal in certain ways, which includes IT, anything posting by IT and so on and so forth. so that it's the act itself. The left was it is the characteristic thing of the left being extraordinarily weak about taking up the legislation when the legislation is attacking the legislation when the legislation is passed, allowing the stuff to go through. Same with the Crime, Justice, Public Order Act and the redefinition of public nuisance, which was simultaneously a redefinition of public nuisance, which didn't make it easier to it made it easier to convict people of public nuisance by making it under a recent act rather than under common law dating back to the 1190s. But the flip side of it was that it redefined public nuisance so as to exclude the activities of polluters, which had been a large part of public nuisance before. The consultancy firm, this sort of cynical, and I agree with Paul Fleurs in the sense that it's like the cynical. I'm not sure that it's quite like it. I agree that it's not like Eichmann in the sense that Eichmann actually was, as Paul says, Eichmann was actually committed Nazi, but it's in a sense. It's more like the Rand Corporation, which gave the United States government advice about how many mega deaths, how you use game theory in order to intimidate the Soviets and anybody else by you had to be willing to accept 40 million, 50 million dead in a nuclear war and so on and so forth. Of course, the Rand Corporation is still engaged in the same activities about how the United States government can hold the uh, rest of the world in subordination by military force, which is at the end of the day what the state of Israel is about. It's an instrument for the United States to have blocking control of oil supplies. And the United States needs blocking control of oil supplies because oil supplies drive armies and air forces and navies. It's not about controlling the price of oil. It's not about any of those things. It's about US military control of the rest of the world through its settler colony in Israel. Third point, is the RCP going to get institutional literacy? We were talking at the PCC about a question. Why the hell is Corbyn, the team, quote, Team Corbyn, playing games around this stuff? Mm. And we were sort of thinking about it in terms of that it's Corbyn's trying to hang on to the possibility of getting back into the Labour Party. It was certainly the case, that this is a guy who was committed to the Labour Party from a very young age and clung on in the Labour Party through a long history of it being dominated by the right. But it occurs to me that the other element is precisely the point we were just talking about, that it's about, that Raphael was just talking about, that it's about ensuring a regime which will actually be sufficiently controllable that it's possible to exclude the trots. Because, of course, this was the problem with momentum, which it forced them to do this referendum fakery and so on, was that the trots got in and they were very concerned to keep the trots out. And I think that they must be just as much concerned to keep the trots out now. And indeed, actually, the official Communist Party out for that matter, if they were to come on board. They are the Morning Star guys. And it may well be that the question is underlying it is a question of how do they have a control operation sufficient to secure a thoroughly bureaucratic regime without being seen to do so. because of course that was what was wrong with Momentum, was that it started out with, it had a more or less democratic structure, and then they had to be seen to demolish the more or less democratic structure.
The problem with Palestine Action and other such elitist groups is they're not under wider democratic control, and they're precisely there's a danger that they can be, I'm sure they are, infiltrated, and therefore it's very hard to distinguish between, what's a useful action and what is an action that's designed actually to damage the wider movement. And I don't think there's an easy answer to it. And all I would say is I'm not going to condemn Palestine Solidarity Campaign. I just think that, such legislation puts you in a very difficult position. I mean, it's designed to, isn't it? So in Parliament, apparently, you can get up and say, I'm Palestine Action. Out there, outside Parliament, you get arrested. And the question is, as you quite rightly say, if there's 200,000 of us shouting, we're all Palestine Action, that's one thing. Okay, they might arrest 20 of us, but you make a mockery of the law. On the other hand, if there's 20 of you shouting it out, then they'll just arrest you. So if, for example, the CPGB, if the Weekly Worker this week came out with a headline, "We are Palestine Action," if you wanted to get closed down, if you wanted to get be arrested, and if you think that would take the movement forward, go ahead. I wouldn't myself. I mean, all I would say is that you decide when to observe the law and how to observe the law. So, for example, in Russian conditions, Pravda didn't come out with provocative articles, but it reported its Duma MPs who did. So it's a tactical question, and so again, I just think we need to navigate this this question. That we don't start off with, this is the principle, that's the principle, of course, is you're in solidarity with them. How you express it, that's a tactical question. And we're in solidarity with them, of course, because we're Democrats, not because we agree with them. You don't need to agree to be in solidarity. It's like being on strike, isn't it? Don't need to agree with all your strikers. You're in solidarity with them. Okay, Pam, you also raised up, look, it hasn't affected the Israeli Defense Forces. Well, and I agree with that. Well, it's affected them, but so marginally, it's utter irrelevance. But that's true with all our demonstrations. The Israeli Defense Force, might be running out of bombs, but it's got nothing to do with the solidarity movement. It's to do with how many bombs they're dropping. But politically, clearly, the ruling elite have got a problem, and there's a huge gap between where Parliament's at and where the mass of the population is at. Now, I don't know, in terms of opinion surveys and all the rest of it, but I would challenge anybody to look at what's going on in Gaza. You make an excuse about that. It's inexcusable. There's no moral justification for that's what ordinary people, that's my experience, just ordinary people just go, what? I thought we left that behind with 1945 in such blatant, I mean, they keep the press out, but this is just blatant genocidal operation. It's no wonder people, ordinary people, so-called ordinary people, are outraged by it. And there you've got the political class, business as usual. I agree. I mean, thank you, comrades, for the correction. I mean, I'm remembering Eichmann from when I was a very little boy coming home and listening to it on the radio. I remember the trial, and I don't remember much about it except this bloke that was kidnapped. This is my memory of it. Kidnapped from Argentina, put on trial. And what I'm trying to bring out is more Hannah Arendt's description. And that's what I remember, this banality of evil. And that's what I'm trying to say. And I'm glad that Ian raised up the Blair's fan club. It doesn't surprise me that these people have been consulted. And how do we get rid of, how do we solve the Jewish question? And it's just sort of bureaucrats just looking at it as if it's a technical exercise. And that's really what I was trying to get over. I'm not accusing this Boston consultancy group of being rabid Zionists and haters of Palestinians. What I'm accusing them of, though, is being complicit in genocide and being complicit on a business level. And so I go along with the correction. There you are, design us an incinerator that's going to kill masses of people. What sort of, hourly turnover? Oh, let's get me abacus out. That's the banality of it. That's what I was trying to get over. That these people found it perfectly acceptable to get a contract of that sort. Now, I know that one can then say that the whole of capitalism is complicit with murder, like if interest rates go up, if interest rates go down, that means the death of X number of people. And I agree with all of that. Nonetheless, when it comes to agitation, when it comes to moving people, I make no excuses saying that we also appeal to people's emotions. People are, emotional thinking, feeling beings. And we ought to be appealing and shaming these people and rousing people to anger. And you will pick your targets. And so I think it's perfectly legitimate for Marxists to look at what's going on and saying that this is an outrage against humanity. This is something that we find completely unacceptable. And we will hold people to answer for it. And it doesn't just stop, in my view. I'm not saying we're going around executing people or anything like that. But I mean, it doesn't just stop with Benjamin Netanyahu. It doesn't stop with this recording that I heard of these Gaza Humanitarian Foundation people taking pot shots at Palestinians. British capitalism, the British political establishment is complicit in this. And part of building an opposition is precisely rousing people in that manner. It's like looking at outrages against slaves in the US South. You of course you use literature, you use art, you use song, you use what weapons you have available. And we would use all weapons in order to rouse people against this crime. It's a crime. And I don't think we were wrong in the general election. I'd still defend our position. Our position was vote left where you can. What do you want to do then? Abstain. And our general approach in elections is you should try to involve yourself. If this was an active boycott, if you could achieve that, then that would be a different question. But what we're talking about is in my constituency, for example, so many. I mean, if the CPB stood, I would vote CPB. If it was the SPGB, I would vote SPGB. If it was Socialist Equality Party, I would have voted. But instead, I ended up, I had to vote for what her name is, Tulip Sadiq. I'm not going to say she's corrupt, but that's who I voted for. And if there was a general election and I had no left candidate, chances are I'd still vote Tulip Sadiq. And I can explain why, because I think the Labour Party is a bourgeois workers' party, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, all elections involve some. I mean, then you'd prick me up and say, how on earth could you vote for Socialist Equality Party? Aren't they a load of Helioites? And okay, well, yeah, yes. Not going to get. We want to involve ourselves in politics, and we want to be posing things in the best way we can, and that's the tactic that we chose. So, yeah. Vote left. What does that mean? Well, work it out yourself, we said. Go along and canvass along with the RCP. Go along and canvass with the Socialist Equality Party. I'd canvass with the SPGB. I wouldn't put necessarily their program forward, but I'd have no problem as long as they were as long as I was acceptable to them, and I could put my argument on the doorstep. No problem, because it would be anti the Labour Party, right? We're not auto Labourites, but also we've made the point to the left that we're not auto anti Labourites. It's a tactical choice, so it's no principle involved. The principle, if there's anything, you need to involve yourself in the election campaign, if that's nearest thing I can think to a principle in that particular context. Raphael, thanks. I enjoyed your contribution, and you made a very good point. I mean, I'm well aware of SPEW, and SPEW standing for a revolutionary program. Wow, show me it. I mean, the last time I came across RCP comrades, personally to talk to, other than having a quick chat on the demonstration, they were supporting Clause 4 and Fabianism. So they wanted a new Clause 4. They didn't want a new Clause 4. They wanted the old Clause 4. This is talking in the context of the Labour Party. So yeah, I'd be interested to read the SPEW revolutionary program. When was that thought up? I don't know, but good. Let's talk revolutionary program then, comrades. That will be a step forward. Yeah, Mike. I mean, perhaps what it is, rather than saying they don't want trots, I think the better way of putting it is they don't want trots interfering with what they're doing. And therefore you end up with something like Momentum, which abolishes branches, which abolishes districts, which reduces us all down to an atomized tick or cross. That they could cope with. But branches where there was the SWP, branches where there was SPEW, branches where there was us, branches where there was the whole of the left, they wouldn't want that. And also, I beg to differ with you. I don't think that will be the natural habitat of the Morning Star's CPB. But anyway, we'll leave that one aside. It would be, from their point of view, a madhouse. And what you'd get, of course, is after a time, branches would differentiate. You'd have an elected leadership. And the chances are that they wouldn't be Corbynite, would they? I mean, if it's a Corbyn party, the chances are it will be a comrade in SPEW and SWP, one of us, RCP, who knows? And then there'll be shifts, but they wouldn't want that because they wouldn't want to be held to account by that. So therefore, yeah, the danger is, the likelihood is either they go in for banning or they go in for bureaucracy. And clearly Momentum was caught on the hop, and they ended up with a load of loony lefties, as they would view it, had to introduce this coup, supported by Jeremy, supported by John, supported by Diane, abolished any trace of real democracy and introduced this nightmare. But also think back, I don't know if there's any comrades, there are some comrades on the call who remember way back with Arthur Scargill, when we first heard about his party. I think it was in the miners' strike, at the end of the miners' strike, these meetings in the Northern Hotel next to King's Cross Station. I don't know if anyone knows the Northern Hotel. Anyway, these meetings were happening, and we were invited, I think, to have talks. I think we lasted one meeting before they said, we don't want to know that. What happened was, when they formed the party, they had this organization called FISC, Fourth International Supporters Caucus, on the door, and they were asking everyone who came in, are you a member of the CPGB? Seriously, I'm not joking. One of our comrades I know was a bit like, is it George Washington? Or was it Abraham Lincoln? I always get this one wrong. It was Abraham Lincoln, wasn't it? Tell me if I'm wrong.
George Washington.
It was George Washington. There you are. Thank you, Mike. But anyway, one of our comrades says, yeah, fuck off. All the rest of us lied. But there was a witch hunt from day one. That's the point I'm really making about Scargill's party. Some participated willingly in it. Some didn't participate. And so, for example, I'll always have a soft spot for him. Sod his politics. I'll always have a soft spot for Harpal Bra, who actually turned round to his son, who was tempted to point me at me. He's one of them. He was going to go, and Harpal just went like that. Don't do that. And yeah, I know Scott. He ended up on the executive, but he didn't witch hunt. And Fisk did. Loads of others did. And yeah, so either you have, the Labour Party's anti-communist clauses, like Scargill, which is just amazing, isn't it? The same as the Labour Party in the 20s, or you end up with a Bonapartist momentum, John Landsman type arrangement. My guess, for what it's worth, is it's more likely to be a momentum type monstrosity. But Raphael, I mean, I'm waiting for the Carla Roberts article as well, but I don't think I was joking about. I don't think she's any wiser than I am. I think we're all in the dark. I mean, tell me what the hell is going on in Jeremy's mind. I can't work it out. I mean, does he want to get back in? He hasn't said so. Is he waiting for trade unions to break? He hasn't said. I don't know. I haven't got a clue. Why is he pouring cold water on it now? I don't know. So we're all mystified. That's it.
Thank you. Anne McShane would like to come back in. Just before I ask Anne to come back in, I'll just make a couple of little observations. One is on the question of Nick Rack and whether his attendance at Communist University. He had been asked repeatedly whether they were going to attend Communist University. And I think in social media, I had said that I think their decision not to come to Communist University would be an act of cowardice. And on the basis of that, I was told, who said we didn't say we weren't going to come to Communist University? But they had flatly refused to even reply to repeated requests. Are you coming to Communist University? So I assumed that they were not. I am delighted that they are, and I look forward to that debate going on. One other thing, just a small observation about PIP. PIP, of course, replaced what was disability living allowance, and disability living allowance, the forms that were needed to be filled in to claim disability living allowance were usually filled in by a GP, and of course GP is mindful of the fact that having a reasonable income does wonders for your health. Tended to sign people off because they could see people who clearly were unwell would be better if they were a bit better provided for. What's happened subsequently is that typically nurse assessors, but it doesn't have to be a nurse, it could be a paramedic, or it could be a OT or someone, a profession allied to medicine. And it's interesting, if you go online, there are hundreds of these jobs going to be a PIP assessor, and it's interesting what they pay. It's kind of band 6 in health speak. So it's about 38,500 to 39,000. Some paying even a little bit more. And the interesting thing about it is that this is such a horrible job that it has a very, very high turnover. So some nurses will sign up for it, for example, because it gets them off the ward, or for whatever reason they need to work from home or something. And it allows you to work from home quite often just using an algorithm. I was a different type of nurse assessor. I did continuing healthcare nurse assessment when I needed to work from home. I worked with people who had been PIP assessors, and they absolutely hated it. It was such a disagreeable job, just simply robbing people of their benefits, because that's effectively what they end up doing. But that's not to sort of a moralistic slur on the people who take up these jobs. It's understandable why they do, but that's just that was my experience of it anyway. Okay, Anne McShane, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So I just had to come back to this question of the 2024 election and the CPGB advice. So it was it's actually set out in an article, a report of the aggregate before it, and it says the CPGB continues to characterise the Labour Party as a bourgeois workers' party, and therefore recommends vote for the left where you can, vote Labour if you must. while it is imperative to get the Tories out, a good vote for the left may aid a process of consolidation after the election, as well as the possibility of electing people from the left. So I have no problem with the vote for the left. What I do have a problem with, what I am saying to you now is that it was a mistake. I believe it was a mistake to just call for, outside of where the left was, to call for the Labour Party, be it Keir Starmer or whoever. You didn't say vote for left MPs, which has been a tactic at other elections. And then also in relation to the boycott, I think you said something there like, oh, if we had a mass movement, we could have a boycott. Well, that's not true, because we have used the boycott tactic in other elections and in referendums. In referendums, as far as I'm aware, that is your tactic. That is my tactic, is to boycott it. So you don't have to vote along the lines of, have to vote for a candidate in order to engage. You can go in and you can spoil your ballot paper. I just think, oh, okay, it wouldn't have made any difference to the outcome of the election, I know, but like, I just think it was a mistake to call for people to vote Labour if you must, because you made no distinction between the Labour MPs that were up for election or candidates were up for election, and therefore I think that meant that you were not acting in a way that would, I just think it was I suppose I just think it did seem to me like a lesser of the evils, because you said it was paramount to get the Tories out. And there you are, here they are, they're as bad as, if not worse than, the Tories. So I'm being passionate in my argument. I'm not blaming you for, Keir Starmer or anything like that. I'm just really examining this issue, which I think is a legitimate one to examine. And then just second point, and very briefly, on the Palestine action and my point that everybody should rebel. Well, of course I don't, people shouldn't put themselves at risk as individuals, and you have to be really careful. But I think that should be the general approach, because the government in Britain and also in Ireland, not as bad, but following in the footsteps, is using the law in order to criminalise a movement. And I think it's extremely important that we face that down as a movement. And there is a movement. It's not like it's just little pockets of people. There is a mass movement, not organised enough properly, but certainly I would say that the vast majority of people in Britain oppose the banning of Palestine action. And also because of the fact that it is linked to a criminalisation or an attempted criminalisation of the movement as a whole, because I have heard reports that that there have been problems on some demonstrations with people calling Free Palestine. Or of course we've had the other one in Britain, again not in Ireland at the moment, of From the River to the Sea. Anyway, I leave it there. Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Comrades, anyone else? If not, then it's over to you, Jack.
I'm doing the old mistake again of not demuting myself. Okay, well, it's really just then answering Anne, and it's perfectly legitimate to question any tactic, and that's what we're talking about. So we're not talking about a principle. That's the first thing to establish. In terms of the last election, we're not we could have said vote left Labour candidates, and we could have named them, i.e. those in the Socialist Campaign Group. Wouldn't be much use to me. I'm not saying it's all about me, by the way. I had one Labour candidate, not two. I had a straight down the middle Starmerite. Okay, so I spoil my ballot paper. Nothing wrong with spoiling your ballot paper. But we emphasize, and we've always emphasized, keeping the thing open. And given that we, how should I put it, continue to characterize the Labour Party as a bourgeois workers' party, I think it's a perfectly reasonable tactic to employ, because what is being chosen, and I don't accept your description, what is being chosen isn't so much as an MP, it's a government. That's what the general election was about. So yeah, in I don't know, you know, under different circumstances, we, for example, when we were standing candidates, I think you stood, didn't you? Couldn't tell you when, but for the Socialist Alliance. And we put forward the idea in the Socialist Alliance, not only should we support our own candidate, obvious, but we should also seek out candidates on the left of the Labour Party and actually support them, not just vote for them, but support them. And we lost that vote. And I think we wrote, didn't we, to Diane Abbott with the Socialist Alliance, I don't know, it was the 6 pledges or some other bollocks like that. And we got a reply from either her office or Diane herself, I couldn't even remember. And she said, yeah, I support that. And we turned around, okay, you know, this is piss poor politics, but we turned around to the comrades in Socialist Alliance and said we should have been supporting Diane Abbott, because this would create a division. So, okay, all of this is a tactical question. And so you would approach one election differently to another. So maybe you're right. And if I hadn't have voted for what her name is, Tulip, well, you know, things would have still been the same. And I don't know, would I be able to go around? I mean, I meet people in the supermarket, especially given her, you know, corruption scandal and all the rest of it, you know, and have discussions about Tulip. And all I turn around and say, I voted for her, but I voted her with no illusions. And that's all I can say. I mean, okay, so maybe I could turn around and say, I didn't vote for her. And all my Tory friends and Liberal friends and all the rest of it, they say, I did. Okay, so fair enough, you know. So I don't think that it's make or break. Just on referendums, you're wrong. You're right and wrong. We don't have an automatic boycott. We object to referendums. We don't like referendums. We think they are stinky as a constitutional device, but it isn't automatic. So, for example, I don't know whether there are any others, but under the coalition government, I went along and voted for Nick Clegg's parliamentary reform bit of the election. It was some sort of semi-PR element that he wanted to introduce. He lost completely, hands down, to the Tories and Labour. But we voted, I say we, you know, all of us, we didn't swing it. But so we don't adopt an automatic, we weigh things up and we say, here's how we'll present our politics. And so, yeah, when it comes to, for example, to the EU referendum, I think the total boycott in Britain was 28,000. Now, the idea that we accounted for anything other than you know, which is a tiny percentage, but that we were making a moral stance. And because of the politics at the time, all I would say is I recognize, you know, it's a legitimate option to choose lesser of two evils. If you made that, you automatically apply lesser of two evils, then you turn it into a principle. But as a way to concretely examine something, I think you should know, I'm sure it's been told you, I think Leon Trotsky put it once along the lines of, well, it's perfectly legitimate, for example, for me to choose, I don't know what a slow acting poison is, Ian would better tell us, because I live to kill the guy the next day. So if you gave me arsenic, I would choose arsenic to someone shooting me in the head with a bullet, because bang, I'm dead. With arsenic, if I know they're giving me arsenic, I can get my gun and shoot them. That's paraphrasing Leon Trotsky. So in other words, it's not something that we would automatically reject. Oh, you can't do that because that's lesser of two evils. Why can't you choose lesser of two evils? You can, as long as you don't turn it into an automatic system. So every election you go along like they do in the United States and say, well, you've got to choose the Democrats because you've got the Republicans. And I would still say, you know, if you take Starmer government and you compare it with whatever we had last time, you know, it's a lesser of evils, but that isn't saying much. So we're, you know, we're not claiming this is a strategy. So all tactics, you know, especially when you're weak, have huge disadvantages, and we're just trying to highlight our politics. So we're trying to make the argument to the left. Remember, that's leaving the Labour Party in disgust and announcing the end of, somehow the Labour Party is completely different under Starmer than it was under Wilson or under Kinnock or under Ramsay MacDonald or whatever it happens to be. And we're saying, no, it's not. It stinks. It's the most right-wing Labour government we would expect. But no, it's still the same sort of organisation, bourgeois workers. So we wanted to have that argument with the left. And therefore we said, vote Labour where you have to. It's a way of illustrating our politics. And I personally think it's not a bad way of doing it. At the same time, we said, okay, even if it's a Socialist Equality Party or SPGB, I don't mean that horribly, comrades, I love you, really. But, you know, even if it was CPB, I voted CPB not unrecently. And the person I went to the poll with said, how can you vote for those people? They're Stalinists. Well, again, yeah, I could, because what choice did I have? So I agree it's weak. I voted for a Stalinist candidate. Yeah. But so I'm just trying to illustrate that we're flexible. And even when it comes to referendums, which we reject as a form, we still can adopt a tactical approach. It's not automatic that there's a referendum and you say we're going to boycott it. It depends. And so I try to illustrate my argument about the nature of the Labour Party. We want to have that argument. At the same time, we're saying that we want a left-wing challenge, and any challenge at that under those conditions was better than no challenge. Okay, terrible and useless, but nonetheless. Can't remember what's yeah, okay. Mass defiance. I agree with what you're saying on that. So tactically, you want to be advising people, you know, be careful, there is this law. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being aware of the law and not deliberately go out and get a 5-year sentence. I mean, if we want to be a martyr, I don't really see the advantage of that, unless you had the masses, you know, demanding your freedom and were prepared to storm the prison. Great, but they wouldn't at the moment. But also on a demonstration, I tell you this, I don't know what it's like in Ireland. Our demonstrations are filmed, and as you know, in London, I think it's Britain is the most surveilled society on the planet, I think, even compared with China, and London must be way up there. We're surrounded by cameras all over the place, and they don't tend to come for you there with snatch squads on the demonstration because people would defend you. They film you. So there have been arrests, and I filmed them, you know, well, taken pictures, and precisely people rally to rescue that comrade, but they've been filmed. They can recognize the face. They come at midnight or early in the morning. And so again, you got to urge people to be sensible. And okay, if you're going to shout out, we're all Palestine action, is that a good tactic? I don't know. I don't know, because they're not going to arrest 200,000, but they could easily arrest 200 of the ringleaders. So I'm very loath to start calling leaders. I mean, I don't know Ben Jamal personally. I don't know him even to say hello to, but I don't want to put myself up and saying, you're just, you're creep, you know, why don't you become a martyr? Because he would become the martyr. That's a political decision, and I'm not wanting to make it for others. So, for example, if you take, I mean, heroic stances that have paid off politically, Liebknecht and Bebel in the Franco-Prussian War, Liebknecht's second vote in the Reichstag when he was meant to have parliamentary immunity. Yeah. So, but I'm not going to start telling people you should do this, you should do that. You know, we're not leading the movement. We're very much a fringe voice. And yes, we ought to be in solidarity. We are in solidarity with Palestine Action because they can end up with stiff prison sentences. And any socialist worth their name would be in solidarity, would stand with these people. Someone who can't is a scab, sure. So yeah, we should stand with these people. And what we're doing, I mean, again, small, I know, we're making sure that the paper gets to these comrades, gets to the Just Say No to Oil comrades. It's a small gesture. You know, we think that they're admirable. So we recognize the heroism and the self-sacrifice, but we want them to devote their energies to building something that can stop this bloody system. And comrades have pointed out, and they know it, they know that painting a plain red isn't going to stop the Israeli defense. Of course they do, they're not stupid. Or spraying a headquarters, they know that. What they're trying to do is, what's the word, focus mass anger. So that you know, the motivation is splendid and admirable, but we want them to redirect their energies, just like the climate change comrades, into the party project. And that doesn't involve any sneering or any denigration of them. Quite the opposite. You know, we have huge admiration for these comrades. Yeah.